I will do everything I possibly can to bring some success here to the football club.
It's the Martin O'Neill effect! Celtic have prevailed in extra time. Callum McGregor with power! Too much for Butland! In my soul, every fight out of control. Kieran Tierney sliding in as Osmond! Crowd is here, about to blow. And it's Johnny Kenny with a cracker! Out the curtain, lights go up from home. Celtic have a new lease of life! It comes from their captain!
Players solved the puzzle in the game.
Martin's just giving me trust, really. That's all you need.
Now the players want to show they've got a bit about them. Your job as a Celtic player is to be in finals and win things.
Extraordinary, really, honestly, and I'm really grateful. Privileged to manage Celtic.
It's the Martin O'Neill effect! Celtic have a new lease of life!
No, you just wanted to leave, young man.
Hello and welcome to the Cynic Weekly on Wednesday the 5th of November. Remember. I'm your host Barry Gallagher, and as always I'm joined by Stuart Dugan. Stuart, how are you?
Very well, Barry. I was concerned that perhaps we'll be having a different conversation this week than the one we're about to have, so I feel sprightly and very much looking forward to it.
Very much so. Scott, how are you?
I'm good, as we were just discussing, I moved flat on Friday and then I came up to Glasgow and then I came back down and had a mate visiting and I've ended up drinking the last 4 days, so it's been a bit of a whirlwind, but Celtic wins over Rangers make everything better.
That's it. I was going to say that's one hell of a bender to celebrate the League Cup semi-final. But yeah, I think we'll just get straight into it because there's a sort of action-packed show tonight. And Stuart, I'll come to you first. So, would you give Martin O'Neill the opportunity to lead the team out in the League Cup final? Or if the outstanding candidate is available before then, would you rather bite the bullet and get him in post?
I think that we're in a very fortuitous position right now, and when I say we, I suppose the fans finally, because you are starting to get some positivity and some excitement from the season, but the we I refer to is probably the Celtic board, that they're in a very lucky position that they have a beloved icon who's come back in with quite an interesting and exciting coaching team, and they're getting a tune out of the players. So that can go on for as long as that lasts, ultimately, and everyone will be quite happy. And, you know, they're not famed for making big decisions quickly, so, you know, they then have this sort of safety net. I do think that what we need to strip out of that question straight away is the sentimentality of it, because Martin O'Neill has more than etched his name in Celtic history, folklore, everything. He's come in and won 2 games, which is amazing, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's the best thing for the club moving forward, for that to continue for a protracted period of time, or because it would be amazing to watch him also lift a trophy again in 2025, which is obviously not on anyone's bingo card. If that happens, though, if we can't get the right person, and providing they're happy to continue on, and providing it's still working and it's not like a sort of new manager bounce and then there's a half-life and they sort of the team reverts and the performances drop, it would be an amazing thing to see. But I don't think it's something that we should be targeting specifically because it would be so nice. I think we have to remember that so much protest and revolt has gone into this season to try and be a serious football club of befitting of the stature that you know we think we should be at, and it's not a very big football club move to bring in a sort of nostalgia signing to manage the team because the vibes are really good for a couple of weeks. I think if we're serious about it, we need to get a serious manager in and start planning for January and start planning for the rest of the season and start planning for the next few years. So if it happens, great. If not, it looks like we're in quite safe hands, which I'm not sure that we would have definitely said we were when the arrangement was originally kind of suggested.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. And Scott, I suppose that it is hard, and one of the questions that we'll come on to from one of the listeners maybe alludes to that, but I think for Celtic fans of our sort of generation, and I suppose even the generation after us, they've kind of grew up on the stories of Martin O'Neill, but it just does feel really nice just now. But I kind of feel like, as Stuart says, we can't kind of rely on sentimentality. We have to be a serious football club. And I suppose from my point of view, if the candidate that we want is available, I would push the button and go and get him. But it is a nice sort of kind of safe pair of hands and a nice position to be in as things stand, I would guess.
Yeah, I think Stu's right. Like we do need to try and strip the sentimentality out of it, but at the same time, especially for people of our generation, it's almost impossible to do that. So when I was talking to like mates and stuff in group chats last week, I got the impression I was more sceptical than most people about the idea of this management team, and I think a big reason for that was because it was touted, maybe not Maloney and Fotheringham, etc., but the idea of O'Neill coming in was touted during the COVID season, wasn't it? And we've already spent so much time this season talking about all the kind of eerie, unwelcome hallmarks between this season and that season. And I just kind of instantly recoiled at that. And then, of course, like basically from exactly a week ago with the Falkirk game onwards, I've loved everything that's happened since. Like, it has just been so much fun, apart from anything else. But in the back of my mind, I think the part of it for me was always the idea that, like, I think we've got a responsibility to those two guys as well. Like, we don't want to do anything that harms their reputation or that puts them in an awkward situation or that damages their relationship with the fans either. And so in my head, I thought, even if it goes well, hopefully it's just a case of going up to the international break, and then we'll get someone in. And now I'm a lot more relaxed about that, if it is slightly longer term. But I have just got it in my head that if it goes as far as that, like that around about midway through next month, and we beat Roma, which you could imagine us doing in sort of classic Martin O'Neill European night style, and then we win the League Cup final against St Mirren with those two in charge, I find it really hard to imagine that them not just being given the job permanently at that point, and in the showers or otherwise. Especially because, as we've discussed before, I think so many people are going to who have been mentioned as amongst the bookies' favourites, are going to walk sideways away from the job, or already have started doing so in the cases of people like Craig Bellamy. So I think the concern for me is that we've got some good candidates being mentioned. I don't think there's anyone with enough of a sort of wow factor whereby it's worth putting the whole club on pause and waiting 2 or 3 months for them. Like when there was the discussion about Muscat going to Rangers recently, and I think the initial chat was, this would have been late last month, but the initial chat was, he might be available to take a job around about the 26th, 27th of November. And I thought that was slightly mad for a club with all their troubles to be willing to wait a full month. I think for a club of our size, with what we're trying to achieve this season and in the future, the idea of it that we could wait till then, I'm not really comfortable with that. So it's a mixture of things. For me, as I say, I'm happy for it to go on a little bit longer, but if it does get to that stage of next month, I think it will just have a sort of natural momentum of its own, and it could well lead to this management team just being confirmed in place. And I think we've all watched football long enough to know that these sort of sentimental appointments, maybe if you could look at Ole Gunnar Solskjaer at Man U, for example, they all have a similar trajectory where it works to begin with because it's a change and it's nostalgic and there's so much enthusiasm involved. They do tend to have a certain shelf life, and I would worry about it, 6, 12, 18 months down the line, especially because as good as we have been in the last 2 games, all the sort of key elements of those performances are quite simple things. They're about enjoying yourself more and having a bit more freedom and working harder and running more and stuff. I think Maloney actually said that in his Celtic TV interview. What have you changed tactically? Very little. I would have some concerns about that long term. So very long-winded answer, but basically, I would hope we'd got someone in by this time next month, because I just, as I say, as intrigued as I am by names like Knutson and so on, I don't think he would be such a nailed-on success that you just say, okay, we'll wait until end of January, start of February, or whatever it is.
Yeah, it's true.
I also think with certain targets like Knutson, it really bothered me. I'm sure it definitely bothered you, Barry, and I'm certain it will have bothered Christopher as well, that we were taking Gordon Strachan's word at an after-dinner speech that the club were doing this specific thing, and that's what everyone was leaping on. The notion that if Knutson becomes available in December, that Celtic will be at the front of the queue, I think is a little bit fanciful as well, because that's a guy who people have been trying to prize out of that club for years, and you're pretty much at the crunch point for teams that are facing relegation in the English Premier League, teams that are trying to get championship qualification into the playoffs, that sort of thing. So I just think that from a financial perspective, you might be sort of priced out there. And also we've been burned before by doing the sort of eggs in one basket with the Eddie Howe thing. And I do have concerns about, I think it would be better for everyone if this was just set up as a sort of holiday romance and the vibes are great and you leave it and you're like, that was so good. And then you can romanticize it as much as you want as well in the aftermath. And hopefully we can get on. And one of the concerns that I have is that the more the players get used to this, the more upheaval there is when it's taken away. Do you know, if you know what I mean? And similar concerns about, I don't want Martin O'Neill to be going down with the ship from a squad that has still obviously had an incredible bolt put through it in the last sort of week, but you can still see that there are areas where we're just lacking in quality and in depth, and that's probably going to only get you so far. So yeah, I think the perfect scenario would probably be an international break to get someone in.
Just as you mentioned there, the holiday romance, and you're talking about the squad, it's like they've caught feelings, isn't it? To use that Love Island phrase.
Very much so.
Just kind of looking at the calendar, so to get to the cup, or until the cup final from the night that Maloney and O'Neill took over, would be around 7 weeks, and that does seem a long time. As Scott, as you mentioned, I was the same when the talk was that Rangers were going to wait that long for Muscat. I thought that's not how a proper football club operates, but it is a difficult one. And just kind of on this subject further, Tommy sent in a question. So this time last week we were all in shock and disbelief. Now after 2 games and 2 wins, we're back. Let's say we win one and lose 2 of the 2 remaining games. Win one and lose 1 of the 2 remaining games. Martin O'Neill walks off to the Talk Sport studio and the Celtic board spins a narrative that Maloney was the brains and we don't need to search for a new manager, which is highly likely. Are we gullible to swallow that? Scott, you mentioned the Sean Maloney interview, and we'll kind of touch on that shortly, but I guess that's kind of the scenario that you painted light almost. It's like O'Neill goes off as the figurehead, but Maloney takes the kind of hot seat, and that, as Tommy says, it could be very likely known Celtic, but I think we've got to kind of guard against that. What's your kind of thoughts on that?
Yeah, I do see where he's coming from. I have some similar concerns as I kind of outlined in the first question, but I don't feel quite that sceptical about it. I do worry as well that, there was some chat about Maloney, director of football, the other day as well, wasn't there? Yeah. I do think there's this thing with Maloney where he's so kind of convincing and articulate. He's clearly more intelligent than your average footballer. But you do just get to a stage where you're like, you can give him any role. Behind the scenes, any kind of technical, strategic role, and he'll nail it. And it's maybe not that simple. But I do think the thing about the idea of us all being gullible and so on, I don't think people are enjoying this that much purely because we've won 2 games and one of them's a semi-final against Rangers. I think there's more to it than that, and part of it is the nostalgia and sort of all reliving our youths and stuff. But I think also part of it is it's the tactical freedom. And it's even just the way O'Neill's acting and interviews and on the touchline and all of that, just because it's so out of step with what we've seen at Celtic with Brendan Rodgers, but what we see in football everywhere we look nowadays. Like managers are we're almost kind of technocratic in the way they approach it nowadays. There's so much emphasis on analytics and stats, and it feels like they spend so much time just like watching games and sort of living at the training ground or somewhere in like, you know, the suburbs of whatever the city is. That there's not that much connection with the actual fans and with the life of the club revolving around the stadium. So I honestly think that's a big part of it as well. I don't want to go down the route of just decrying all sort of tactical sophistication as utter woke nonsense, but
Like Martin O'Neill would.
yeah, well, yeah. His XG rant a couple of weeks ago. But I honestly think that is a big part of it. It's not just, as I say, that we've won a couple of games, we've beat Rangers, blah, blah, blah. It's just that there is sort of a joyfulness and a simplicity to it, to the performances, but also sort of the show that's going on around it, which does feel just refreshingly old school.
Yeah, definitely. And I think we're going to feature heavily talking about the Rangers game, but I think because Maloney's been mentioned there, just kind of some of the key points. Stu, I'll come to you first. So the first thing that kind of jumped out to me, obviously he talked about Callum Osmond, which we'll come on to, but he spoke about how he leaned heavily on the senior players. So obviously McGregor was singled out, Kasper Schmeichel, James Forrest, etc. But he really kind of heaped praise on AJ and CCV. Particularly CCV, he was talking about CCV who had just obviously had the operation, but he was determined to be at the game on Sunday. And he said that they've been a massive help. He also kind of spoke about Mark Fotheringham. I think he got the call at 11 o'clock, half 11 at night, to say would he come and join the coaching staff, and he arrived at 6 o'clock the next morning. And I know that from kind of speaking to you, you've enjoyed the positivity of Fozzie. He's not just a meme, as has been said, but as Scott says, Maloney is really impressive and really interesting to listen to. I know that from the pod that Gal did with Will Glavin yesterday on the Cynic.co about the sort of hallmarks of Maloney's coaching kind of being obvious from his time at Belgium. But would a sort of director of football role for Maloney appeal to you, or some technical role, as Scott says?
Well, firstly, I would have loved to have watched this interview, but unfortunately Celtic still have some ways to go in terms of allowing probably quite important bits of PR free and not behind a paywall. Which is just annoying, but we're getting better. We've got the front of the stand coming, the ground coming, and we've got our survey, which we'll talk about. But I think in general, it kind of links into what Scott's just been saying there about why people are enjoying it. And I think not only is it a relief from, we've been watching turgid football since like February. I think it's almost like a renewed hope or connection with players in the team that you thought were kind of done for or thought were checked out, whether that's in terms of the performance. I know like you could highlight players just from those last two games. Arnott Engels is a good example. Austin Trusty, players that you just thought we were kind of like, these have been bad signings, there's not much that we can do from them. To hear Maloney talking about the likes of Alistair Johnson and especially the likes of Cameron Carter-Vickers, who it's very easy if you get a serious injury for 5 months, you just go home, just sit at home, go down south, go on holiday, do what you like. But the fact that they're very, very committed to it and they understand that there's a instability in the group and they want to kind of be there to usher the younger players and the more inexperienced players through that is really, it's good. It just feels like that the whole thing that could completely derail the season has actually galvanised the group. And I think that whatever the end result is, whether it's a new manager coming in with a team, his own backroom team, I think there are elements of this that you'll maybe want to cherry pick and maybe build into the new setup. I don't think that would necessarily be Maloney as manager. As you've said, I think you'd have concerns about that. He's kind of fallen a wee bit short in that role a couple of times, and maybe he's better supplementing that either as a coach or perhaps in a director of football kind of role, or perhaps he's just found his perfect role in developing young players, and maybe that is something that could really, really benefit both him and the club. Mark Fotheringham, I think, is a really interesting one, where you already highlighted so much of what was different on Sunday was just very basic things, not tactics, motivation, hard work, effort, competitiveness, all that sort of stuff. And I think that he gives that in spades. But as you say, he's not a meme. He's worked under really, really experienced managers at really big clubs, and I think he could be a really big asset. And especially if you're talking about the willingness that he has to drop everything and get here the first thing he can. You want people that want to be there. The big knock on Rodgers is that people just don't think he was interested, and that I've never seen a reputation get destroyed in 6 days as quickly, and I'm not. That doesn't even include the Desmond letter. Just when you see some of the decisions that he's made in the last year or two for certain particular individuals, and also the way that we play, and it's just been kind of blown out of the water by some good vibes and some like freedom of kind of expression for the players. So I think there's lots of positives that will come from it, and I think that Maloney is probably at the centre of it. So that is really, really good. And Celtic have kind of fallen backwards into it, as they do tend to. And while you can look at the processes that lead to that sort of thing, I guess we just have to enjoy it and take the positives from it for now.
Just as you're kind of talking about the kind of fall from grace and reputation being kind of chewed up, made me think of how Jesus was lauded in Palm Sunday and then was hanging from a cross 5 days later. Not to put Brendan Rodgers anywhere near in the same bracket as Jesus, of course, but
only he would do that.
Yes, that's true. Scott, the other kind of things that you mentioned, Maloney was asked, and just before we came on there, I feel like the media are kind of looking for that story of what's changed, like what has changed in the last couple of, the last 10 days or so. But he just kind of said, we've made slight changes in terms of anything tactical. I mean, really slight. Probably the biggest one is mentality, to try and hurt the team from behind, run more from the field and the wide players. But again, these things are sometimes you just have to remind them of. I've watched the team for 4 or 5 years, and when they're at their best, they're a hell of a team. He also kind of was asked about, was he nervous going into the game on Sunday, and he said no, but he was for the Falkirk game. He said, he made a point, like, you just kind of assumed that young players coming through are Celtic fans, but I remember when he was played, there was a talk that he was like an Aberdeen fan or whatever, but he said, this is my club, and the club that I came through, the club I supported. So it was nice to see them, and as Stuart says, it was unfortunate that it was behind the paywall, but that interview could have lasted another hour and I would still been kind of hanging on his every word.
Yeah, I've had to just sort of cobble together roughly what he said based on different articles that are out there, which is another kind of avoidable own goal I think the club keeps making, keeps scoring at the moment. But yeah, I think there was some sort of interesting tidbits in there, and it is very true. I think if you look at, we'll obviously come on to talk about it, but if you look at the performance on Sunday, like the mistake we've made repeatedly in derbies over the last year is just allowing ourselves to be outworked by a clearly inferior Rangers team, and it was so refreshing on Sunday to see the amount of times where their midfielders would be dilly-dallying on the ball and one of our players would just come out of nowhere and nick it, and then we're suddenly attacking up the other end. It's a simple thing, but it's something that we clearly haven't been doing enough of in this fixture for a long time. So you do have to give credit to that, credit to Maloney for that, and possibly to Fotheringham as well, who, you know, it is interesting, like if someone's whole sort of persona can just be defined by little sort of 10-15 second clips on Twitter, and I'll admit I laughed at it as much as everyone else, but I think you've got to respect anyone in any walk of life that like goes abroad, commits himself to something, throws himself into it fully, wholeheartedly, learns a new language, does press conferences in that language. Like he's obviously all in everywhere he goes, and the whole thing about turning up at 6 a.m. probably demonstrates that.
Yeah, just before that, you come in, Stuart, he went all in on the German language that he forgot how to speak English. By the way, Stuart, you were going to come in?
Yeah, I was just to say on the specific quote that you had from Maloney where he was like, "Oh, we didn't change much." I think there's a little bit of class coming from him there with regards to Rodgers, because he definitely doesn't. I know he's got a very good relationship with Brendan Rodgers. I know he gave him a break. I think he can absolutely sense the pile-on, not only in the sort of disgraceful way that Desmond put out that statement, but just the court of public opinion. It's really obvious when you have two big results like that and the team have played, and you've brought a tune out of players like Johnny Kenny and players like Callum Osmond. That's just like on surface level. But I think when you watch that, Celtic were doing quite a lot of stuff that they don't normally do. I mean, we didn't run the game through Callum McGregor, which we've been doing for a good 4 years now, and it worked pretty well. And being more direct, the amount of like sweeping crossfield balls that you saw from Trusty, from Ralston, these are pretty significant tactical changes, because that's not something that you would ever see in a Brendan Rodgers team. So I think he's perhaps just being a wee bit coy with that, and they've not reinvented the wheel. They've not come in and said, right, we're going to play a 5-4-1 and this is it, and you're all going to play backwards. It's just like, I think they've done a little bit more, and perhaps it's just been a wee bit protective of Rodgers, which is at the very best professional.
Yeah, and that came across with the media conference that came out tonight. With Schmeichel was with Martin O'Neill, and again they were kind of pressing him about what's changed. And one thing that he did say was that Martin O'Neill kind of reminded them that they are a really good team, and he said that they had needed that confidence boost because obviously results and form had been really poor, but it's amazing what winning football matches can do. And that's kind of one of the things that's kind of shone through. It's probably simplistic to say and maybe giving people less credit than they're due, but O'Neill is always kind of beating the drum that football's a simple game and people complicate it. And I think we're kind of seeing that as we go. But to kind of turn our attention then to Sunday itself, I thought it was a great day. Almost from the first whistle, it felt different, Scott. Like, we were aggressive. As Stu says, that kind of diagonal ball, particularly in the first half, I would say, from Trusty out to Tanetke, and then Ralston was joining in as well. But what kind of pleased you the most about Sunday's performance?
I sort of touched on it a minute ago, I suppose, but it's just the idea that Rangers have mostly been a bin fire for the last calendar year, but we'd somehow managed to go 5 games without winning against them. And there are various different things that explain why that was. I think the 0-0, like we talk about Rodgers, his stock among Celtic fans at least going down day by day at the moment. I think that 0-0 away to Russell Martin's Rangers at Ibrox is going to stand in absolute infamy. And that is a pretty shocking failure when you look at what some other teams have did to Rangers during his short spell. But yeah, I spoke about it before in this podcast, just the idea, for all the problems and all the weaknesses, you can get into cycles and derby fixtures where one team just maybe don't have as good players, but they just fancy it and they just feel like they're on a run. And I think we're worryingly close to that happening against Rangers. And the way they were able to bridge the obvious talent gap more often than not, it was just by doing small things well, and by being aggressive and winning the ball back in midfield, and clamping Calmac and scoring goals from set pieces. And a lot of it on Sunday was just about not allowing those stupid things to happen and to just give the front three a platform to do damage, really. So it was really good not to see us concede an avoidable set-piece goal, and it was really good to see us score a brilliant set-piece goal to open the scoring. But yeah, I was kind of losing my mind at times in the second half, as I'm sure we all were. But a big part of the reason for that was because I'd been so happy with the first half and so pleasantly surprised by it, to be honest, that I just thought, surely we can't surely this can't follow that. Surely, like, because it would have been a historically embarrassing result if we ended up losing to that 10-man Rangers team. For it to follow a first half as good as it had been would have just been bizarre. But the way that we did go again in extra time with a hilarious Jack Butland mistake to boot, it was brilliant to see. And yeah, we just very clearly there was almost a sort of bullish, healthy arrogance about the way we started the game, just going, we're a better team, we've got better players, we're just going to dominate this here. And we were just, there's so many, I touched on it a minute ago, but so many options. We were winning the ball back in midfield, which we just haven't been doing anywhere near enough in this fixture recently. I think the 3-2 at Celtic Park in March in particular, it was pathetic, just how sort of weak and timid we were. But I think what was really good was that there was the right type of aggression as well. Because I look at someone like Raskin, and I honestly think if I was a Rangers fan, I'd be so confused by his behaviour in this fixture as someone who is probably one of the most talented midfielders in the league on his day. He's probably their best player ability-wise. He wastes so much time and energy in this fixture by just trying to start wee fights and just trying to square up to people throughout the whole game. I just find it embarrassing, and I'm so glad that we don't have any sort of wee fanny characters that try and equal that energy and give him what he's looking for. I think we were just much better at, as I say, just recognising that we had better players and putting that into action on the pitch.
Yeah, Stuart and Scott says there, like, I think like almost straight away you could see that we had almost like that kind of swagger, and we were kind of just kind of swatting them aside at times. We looked physically stronger, obviously technically better as well, and it does kind of lend itself to what the players have been saying and what Schmeichel said earlier about like reminding them that you are the better team, you're like the dominant force in the country. And it's crazy that something as simple as that is what's been missing. I'm not saying that's the only thing, but it was apparent almost from the sort of first whistle to my mind.
Very much so. And I think when do you remember the last time Celtic started a game well, let alone a derby? Yeah. Like, they've just been meandering into games, and you could even probably sling that at them for Wednesday, where it took them about 15-20 minutes to get going. But I think it is a little bit of that timidity. Now, obviously, we always talk about it, we're all absolute shitebags for these fixtures. Doesn't matter how good you've been, how bad they are, etc. It's just a horrible churn, regardless. But I would say that the way that we started in that first 5-10 minutes, it's as comfortable as I've felt in one of these fixtures, because you're like, hang on, this isn't end to end. They cannot get out, and they were making so many unforced errors by the way that we were playing. It was almost just like very frustrating that we weren't taking our chances, because we were just getting in, and it was that little bit of lack of quality. And I thought the performance and the result is overwhelmingly positive from where we were to where we are now in such a short period of time. But I do think that you see the limitations of the squad and the limitations of certain individuals in games like this, where perhaps we've still got a wee bit of work to do as a group, where you're not going to have that slight mental fragility in the second half. And also, that is the sort of game where, see if that was just change the personnel. Obviously, if it's still under O'Neill, if that's Postecoglou's Celtic and you're talking about Kyogo, you're talking about Matt O'Reilly, you're talking about players of that quality, I think you're properly taking like five or six goals off them. And that's okay. I think being able to get the most out of the players that we have just now was the goal, to get to January and to see where the squad are, and who this is the first foray for players like Callum Osmond, and maybe it's a proper clean slate for a player like Johnny Kenny. So that's fine. But there are limitations, and you can still kind of see that. But over the piece, I was so surprised at how aggressive we were, how fast we were. It's a variety in play as well. It wasn't just slow, sluggish, side to side, backwards, play everything through McGregor. And yeah, it was a real pleasant surprise. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think, Scott, there was so many kind of standout players in particular. Probably injustice not to name everyone, but I thought Trusty coming in was great, him and Scales, and it has been mentioned on some of the pods on the Cynic this week. It wasn't just a case of kind of penalty box defending. They were being brave on the ball and kind of coming out with the ball. I remember a number of occasions where both of them did that. I thought Sriracha was really good, but you mentioned him earlier. I thought Arnie Engels, that was probably his finest performance in a Celtic shirt, I would argue. I just thought he looked so comfortable in there beside McGregor, and I think McGregor really benefited from having him sort of next to him in the trenches, as it were.
Yeah, and I think he is a confidence player as well. I think that whole thing about being reminded how good you were, like if we think about who the standout performers were at that night of the Allianz, I think Engels was definitely one of them. So maybe he, as much as anyone else, having spent so much time on the bench this season and been a little bit muted, a little bit off it when he has been given game time, like he, as much as anyone else, needed to be reminded of that, because his whole game, it depends on trying things. You know, he's got to be trying those kind of through balls and little chipped balls in behind and shots from the edge of the box, like the one they had that went just narrowly wide. And yeah, I really liked not just his performance, but his whole demeanour on Sunday. Like if you've watched the what's the behind the scenes thing that the club YouTube always puts out?
Minute by minute or something like that.
Yeah, I can't remember exactly what it's called, but if you watch that, there's a lot, like he keeps on, like he really goes for it with the celebrations after the McGregor goal in particular, Arne Engels, and there's a lot of like badge thumping and stuff, which some people might find slightly cringe, but I find that all, you know, I'm here for it, so to speak. Yeah, I think the guys touched on it in the agenda point on Monday. It is very quickly, it has flipped and became, when you're thinking about the composition of a midfield, it is kind of like McGregor, Engels, and someone else at the minute. It does feel like that to me. But yeah, we kind of had loads of good performances, but we specifically had good performances from the guys who needed it most. Engels being one of them, Trusty being one of them, Schmeichel, I would say as well.
Yep.
And even like we're spoiled a little bit in a way, because I thought we got a good performance at Sriracha. But if you want KT to get a little boost for his confidence, then he gets that coming off the bench, getting the assist. Dyson, some really positive signs there for possibly the first time all season as well. So you could go on and on. Like obviously the two strikers did a really good job. I was about to praise Ralston and just realised I was getting totally carried away. But loads and loads of good individual performances, thankfully.
Yeah, I think you're spot on, and we'll come on and talk about the strikers shortly, Stuart. But one thing again that I don't want to get too bogged down in the referee, because that's kind of starting to bore me to tears now with the sort of many days of meltdown, is it now? 3 or 4. But one thing that really pleased me was at the sending off, the reaction of the players. It was transported back to Martin O'Neill's first tenure with, we're not going to be bullied by that, like that's unacceptable, and we were in their face. Dyson, I loved the Rangers TV commentary, he's thrown a punch at the set. But it was great, because if you see the sort of melee afterwards, Dyson's first right in there, Johnny Kenny, and it was like that, and I like to see that, because it's almost as if under Rodgers it was like, oh, we're above that, we're a kind of, we'll just let our football do the talking. But by doing that, you kind of, on the face of it anyway, it looks like you are being bullied, and it was good to see that even that was kind of back on the menu for us.
Yeah, and that's not manufactured. That's not like go out there and act the hard man like you're talking about Raskin, go and pick some fights. That's Maeda's reaction is an incredibly visceral response to someone hurting his mate, and a very physical, quick reaction to it, which is good to see. And you saw it later on as well. Tanecki got into it a wee bit with who was it? Was that Raskin as well? There was some sort of shirt pulling and all that, and everyone was kind of there for it. And that's also without, you know, Alistair Johnston's quite good for a bit of that, and Carter Vickers is quite good for a bit of that, and these players aren't around. And even Osmond towards the end as well, like,
I love that.
It just felt like they'd been told to sort of stand up for themselves a bit and not feel sorry for themselves. And I mean, it's an absolutely dreadful challenge. I think even maybe under Rodgers, you would have probably had some folk running up and questioning that. The refereeing stuff is bizarre. I find it frustrating, because whilst you can enjoy it and it's always funny to watch a meltdown, I don't like that it dominates the narrative as much as it does, it's just kind of sours it a wee bit, in the sense that, let's say, for example, obviously so much of it centres around Trusty and Ralston, those two decisions. Say Trusty hadn't touched him at all. Say he just literally turned around. What does the narrative become? Because I would imagine that they then just put so much more weight and so much more focus on the Ralston decision. And with the Ralston decision, you saw it last night in Real Madrid and Liverpool. These days, that's not a stonewall penalty, and it's certainly not a booking either, because there was one in the Hibs game at the weekend, exactly the same, and you could tell that there almost wasn't like an enormous amount of confidence with that. And you're like, I'm actually going to send off a player here as well as give this penalty that I'm not 100% sure on. So what does the narrative become? And I suppose from a Celtic fans' perspective, I'm quite happy if Rangers think that in some way they were cheated out of that game, because the reality was, when it was 11v11, they were absolutely second best. They were really, really, really poor. The best that they played was when they were galvanised by that and when they took some sort of tactical risks in the second half. And you could argue that we went over the top of them in extra time because they were tired, but I don't see that it would necessarily have been a much different game. I think that there was just all the sort of intangible things that we've talked about, fight, competitiveness, all that sort of stuff. I felt like we had that, and then we're just playing through them almost at will. So it's annoying that it's become so dominant, and that's before you look at the other ones that aren't really grabbing as many headlines. The Cornelius red, which at the time I thought that is an absolute stick-on red card, and I was very, very surprised that it wasn't looked at. And that's not to just throw fuel on the fire of the conversations that have been had all week. The Hitati penalty claim, the Maeda, the first goal, it doesn't really look like VAR's been applied properly, and he's not really offside. So there's lots of things you have to you can always decide to write a letter to the SFA, but I think the reality is the standards of refereeing in this country are terrible, and you're just seeing that in real time. So it's frustrating, and also it starts to take away from the spectacle of it, the stop-start nature of the game. Every time we tried to play a quick free kick, or every time we were just trying to get going and keep the game going, Walsh was stopping it, and it's just a guy that's really, really bad at his job.
Yeah, it was so frustrating for that, and loads of fouls that were given against us weren't given in reverse as well. Just have a look at some of the stats here. So bear in mind that we were the team on the ascendancy for 3/4 of the full match and extra time. We committed 26 fouls, they committed 13. We had 6 yellow cards, they had 3, and obviously the red card as well. So Celtic have got pretty big grievance as well, Scott, as Stuart mentions there, because I thought he was terrible, and for us to win a game 3-1, I still came away from the game thinking that was a horrendous performance from Nick Walsh.
Yeah, it's obviously a tricky balance refereeing that particular type of game, a derby game, a semi-final, but no Scottish referee seems able of striking that balance. None of them seems to be intelligent enough or experienced enough or good at their job enough, basically, to get that balance right. It's always skewed one way or the other. It's either the way Nick Walsh did it on Sunday, which is just blown up for everything, even the tiniest, pettiest little fouls or perceived fouls, or there's what Bobby Madden used to do years ago when you just let everything go.
Yeah. But
when you let everything go and one team's being much more physical and aggressive than the other, which is the way it used to tend to be with Rangers, then you're just penalising us. So yeah, it always sounds like a bit of a cliche and a cop out when your team's won the game, but more often than not, when we have these kind of tiresome, long-winded debates about refereeing decisions after big games in Scottish football nowadays, I just feel like it's another poor performance by one of our officials. It's not any kind of anti-Rangers thing or whatever. It's just, I really think, Stuart rightly mentioned the Cornelius one, and I also found it very strange that we didn't seem to take a closer look at that offside decision, Vidaizen one for the own goal. So I think you can easily make the argument that we had just as many bad decisions go against us as they did. But yeah, I just think in the wider sort of Scottish football landscape, there's some sort of quite cynical, sort of bad faith stuff going on at the moment. Like, Rangers have just been relentless with the statements about refereeing decisions for the last 2 years or so, to the extent where it seems quite concerted, it seems quite premeditated. Like, it's almost the kind of thing you see going on in like Spanish football or Italian football, where we're just going to keep banging this drum until it's a subconscious thing in the back of officials' heads. You know, when you look at that show that Willie Collum does when he talks about decisions, and he was talking about that one that went against Rangers. I can't even remember if it was earlier this season or the end of last season, but the terms that he talked about it were so over dramatic that you could tell he's had a certain amount of pressure applied to him. And just to touch on the other point Stu made about the media coverage as well, this has always happened to a degree in Scottish football, but it happens in parts of the media that we already know are a bit of a rabble, like Super Scoreboard and, the fucking Daily Record Hotline or whatever. What I find a bit depressing nowadays is you see it happening in places that should be a bit more reputable. It's almost like a scandal sales thing. I think we've talked about it before, the way Sky are trying to be so sort of WWE with some of their coverage recently. And I think you see it a lot with the BBC as well at the moment. They just want to churn this stuff out and to have it a sort of never-ending news agenda circling around these decisions for like 48, 72 hours afterwards. And you'll have sort of manufactured argument between, Billy Dodds and Michael Stewart or whatever. And it's all quite depressing. And ultimately, it's quite tedious. And I don't see who's really enjoying that.
Yeah, absolutely. Stuart, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, I think ultimately, just with what you're saying there, it's content is king, and the fact that even when you're 3 games a week and you're on to the next one so quickly, a game of that magnitude, providing there's instant, and maybe I don't know if it's more of a reaction to how poor the last game was, that they finally have talking points here. But just with what you were saying about the statements and that concerted effort, they went and they had their meeting on Monday or whenever it was, and then they released their other statement to say that they're still unsatisfied with what was said. What are they wanting? Do they want to replay the game? Do they really think that's, or do they want them to come out and publicly say Austin Trusty should have been sent off? So yeah, sorry. And then they were like, well, that's why we've been cheated out of another trophy. I think fair enough. Like, some of the grievances that they had about the the cup final last year with the Scales debacle and all that, you get your penalty, but you're not going to necessarily score it. And if Rangers want gilt-edged chances, they had 3 or 4 of them and they missed them all. So it's no guarantee that having Austin Trusty sent off would have changed anything about the game. It's a bizarre one. It was a mad thing for him to do. We've not really mentioned that, but it was quite a mad thing to do.
I do find it funny when you watch back the replays, because I was not that much contact, but it's just the decision making of, like, he doesn't flick the foot until it's like so clearly in Butland's hands. It's like, what?
But I also don't think that he's done it to be like, I'm going to leave one on him here, because that's insane.
No, that was
I think
what
it's
Billy Dodds was trying to say, wasn't it?
So clumsy. And even the fact that he's extremely apologetic immediately, like, I'm really sorry, I didn't mean to do that, but it does look really premeditated. It's bizarre.
I think we can blame it on Rodgers, because you can imagine him saying, who's weak as piss now? The weak as piss tap in the head with his boot.
It was like the water boy when he suddenly pictured Brendan Rodgers sitting there and he just fucking leaves one on him.
Kind of conscious of time, but just to kind of, before we kind of look at some news, and then we're going to touch on the survey. But Scott, a word on Johnny Kenny's performance. I thought he was really good. Could have, on another day, he could have probably had a hat-trick as well.
Yeah, brilliant. It's almost a shame that Osmond has done so well, to the degree that, there's probably been less chat and less praise directed Kenny's way than what he deserved. I mean, I have written this guy off multiple times. The most recent one being Tynecastle, where it was one of those performances where it's not even poor so much as he was just invisible. I can't remember one moment really involving him in that game. But now, not only is he scoring goals, he's getting into all the right positions. He's working hard. There's a real devilment about him. If you look at the way he's celebrated the goal, the aggression, the physicality. I can't remember the last time a Celtic striker scored a header like that from a set piece, unless you maybe go back to like Giacomakis eras or whatever. Yeah, there's a lot to like at the moment. It sounds harsh. I think in the back of my mind, I'm still thinking his best case scenario long term is to be second choice, third choice, Celtic striker. But it does just show you the difference a week can make, and the difference just someone putting a bit of time and investment into coaching you can make. Because even in the Falkirk game, it was night and day, really.
Yeah, definitely. And as you say, it might be that he does have to settle for being sort of third choice striker, but Stuart, he'll always have that now that he's scored against Rangers and a really good goal in a semi-final.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a huge moment, but it's not just the moment. It's because I think he has had moments where, like, if you think about was his debut against Aberdeen where he scores, or like his first start, he scores up at Tawdry. He wasn't great in that game, but he gets that like nice moment. It was his all-round game, and it was his all-round play, and that's in 2 consecutive games. I feel really positive about it, and this is the sort of thing that can come out of one of these mad situations where a player just gets new life breathed into them. I still think that he has his limitations, and I think you're in an interesting situation there where you have 3 strikers kind of competing when Iheanacho becomes fit. And then probably none of them you would want to be like the guy unless suddenly they step up and become the guy. And so that's quite good in the sense that they're being given opportunities and it will foster competition. Where does it leave you in January? What's best for certain players' development, etc.? These are all questions that I think it is helpful to have a new manager come in and decide what's going to be what. But then if the current management team are getting such a tune out, then what do you do? So it's interesting. It's not a problem that I ever thought we had. I thought the most interesting thing about it actually was that when Johnny Kenny's race was run, that it was Osman that they turned to, and it wasn't a reshuffle of the wingers and Maeda coming in. And I think that's quite exciting, where we mentioned it maybe last week, that this notion of we're living in a different reality. We were living in Brendan Rodgers' reality, where he'd put up certain bumpers and certain rules and certain things that weren't even on the menu for options. And I think someone else coming in with a fresh look at it can go, look, it's absolutely fine, and the team functions better when there's a striker playing as the striker. So it both benefits us having Maeda out wide, and it benefits us having a natural striker. So even if you don't think that this young guy who's had next to no game time is ready, it's a better option than having to reshuffle completely and losing like one side of the team and the balance of the team. So I thought that was quite good, and obviously it's created opportunities for new heroes to be born.
That's it. And
sorry, I was just going to say, it was interesting that Maloney's quotes as well. He said he was quite positive about Shin Yamada, and again, whether that's just him being diplomatic and polite, I'm not sure, but that kind of suggested maybe if the door wasn't closed for Osmond, it might not be closed for Yamada, and it might not even be closed for our dear friend JSP. But we'll see as the days and weeks pass, I suppose.
Yeah, and as we've kind of alluded to, Osmond came on, and I think that the chance where the kind of Forrest and Engels played a 1-2, and then Forrest went on an amazing run and played a brilliant pass through to Osmond. I was thinking, God, what an opportunity that is for him in his debut. He also had the header that was saved, but then he scores the winner. And just on those quotes you mentioned there, Scott, Maloney said about Osmond, he's definitely ready for this opportunity. And this is where he mentioned Shin. I think when we were discussing the bench, and between him and Shin's definitely got attributes as well that can help this team. But Stephen McManus has worked with Callum. We've all seen him train now, and he's getting to a point where you can't really hold him back. And then it's how the boy takes that actual opportunity. I knew with Martin coming through Tuesday night, when I met him for dinner, to go through the squad and the players, I knew that he would love Callum. He's the exact type of striker that the manager would like. You can sense that sort of bond between the manager and Callum already, that he feels his trust. And for me, Scott, it kind of reminded me of when O'Neill gave Maloney his opportunity against Rangers at Ibrox in the 3-0 game, where Larson scored his 50th and Lubo get the 2. And it's kind of nice to kind of see that sort of it's kind of almost coming full circle. But I thought I think a few people have made the comparisons that Osman's performance was very Kyogo-like in terms of movement, even his running style and that kind of explosive pace. So don't want to get too carried away, but what an opportunity. I actually text my way after Osman had kind of missed those 2 chances, and I said, like, Osman's got the opportunity here to write his name into history books and then maybe never even kick another ball for us.
Yeah.
But and the other news is that he's been kind of replaced CCV in the European squad tonight. So what a 7 days it has been for Callum Osman.
Yeah, that's a really good comparison, actually, Maloney. I hadn't even thought about that at all. But yeah, I think it shows you the benefits of the O'Neill-Maloney partnership, because they've both played a part in getting them to this point, by the sounds of it, in quite a short space of time. Like, Maloney's got the prior knowledge of him, and of his strengths and his attributes as a player. He's obviously had a word with O'Neill. So that's sort of the technical, tactical side of it. And then you've got O'Neill just sort of doing what he does best and building building up his confidence and making him feel like he is truly a Celtic player and he belongs here. I thought it was quite funny. One of the quotes from Osman post-match was like, "Oh, when I spoke to the gaffer, he said how much he rates me or whatever." And then there was a quote from O'Neill just going, "I didn't know who he was." Like, at least he didn't know who he was at the start of the week when he got the job. But yeah, you see how those two very different styles combine to produce that performance. And I think another kind of feather in his cap is it would have been so easy to just for his head to go down after he misses that chance, the one he put straight out of Butland. But he just went on and on and on and got better and better. And we talk about those sort of sink or swim moments for young players coming through, and it can go either way. And unfortunately for Dane Murray, it went the other way at Tynecastle a couple of weeks ago. But Osmond really stepped up and embraced it. You could tell he was loving every minute of it. Took his goal well, was unlucky with a header. The Tavernier tackle was probably better than both of those moments combined. Yeah. Like, he just absolutely loved it. And yeah, and it was probably such a boost for the fan base as a whole to see him go into the squad, which is another mad moment that we couldn't have foreseen a week ago, that we would all be so happy about that. But it was exactly what everyone was hoping for after his performance on Sunday.
Yeah, more than what no more than what he deserves. And Stuart, I think as Scott mentioned there, not only the tackle on Tavernier, but also the reaction to it and geeing the crowd up. And I'm like Scott, when players grab the badge like that, I can't help fall in love with them, even though that more often than not they leave you and upset you. But at the moment, I love all that shit.
Absolutely. I mean, I think from where we've been and how poor it's been, to have someone that has just been sitting there, as I say, it opens up not only opportunities, dare I say it, pathways for him, but for other players that have just been written off. And his post-match interview was brilliant as well. It felt like, you never know what his career is going to be, but one of those things where he talks about it being the best day of his life and stuff like that might end up being this really iconic moment. Excuse me. I thought his all-round game was really good. I think you can see that he's raw, and so I think it is important that people enjoy it and they get excited about it, but that you probably temper your expectations so that it's not just a flash in the pan. That it's quite a poor finish for the one that had this amazing build up, but then the header is genuinely like it's an incredibly good save from Jack Butland, and he's done absolutely everything right there. And I think it was in the podcast yesterday when they were kind of breaking down the game, talking about how he took instruction from Trusty when Trusty was shouting at him. He was like, "You need to give us an out ball," and then he immediately took it, and then he just did that. And I get the impression that, just when you saw how into it he all was, and you must be on cloud nine, still probably buzzing from it. Maybe that's the sort of thing that will propel him to just have a couple of these moments, and then he gets going, and then he really does become something that you can be genuinely excited about, and he becomes a real option. And I was I know there was a lot of chat about it over the last couple of days about getting him into the squad, and I thought it was just kind of folk getting carried away. And I also thought, I know that this clause exists, but Celtic won't do that in the same way that they had the opportunity to sign players and register them after the certain deadlines, and they just didn't bother. I was like, Celtic won't do that, but they did. And I think it shows that we're going to continue with Johnny Kenny and with him as like your option off the bench. And then maybe when it comes to the game on Sunday, maybe that'll flip and maybe he'll get a start, and who knows. But it's exciting. I was really, really happy for him, and to hear him that he'd been just running in the rain and not really playing any football to having that, it's proper like Roy the Rover stuff, and that's really nice in a season that's not had many happy stories.
Yeah, absolutely. And you could just see how much it meant to him, and it did look really teary at points as well, and it was just a great story. I'd mentioned earlier we would talk about the fan survey that can be picked up later in the week on the weekend update on the Cynic.co. Just kind of before we finish off, we'll turn our attention to tomorrow night's game. Almost feeling away, Scott, that the fixture against Midtjylland and Denmark is almost like a free hit now. That's not to say that if we were to lose it, I wouldn't be upset or disappointed, but it just feels that we're on this sort of wave of positivity, and I'd probably, as I probably did as well, had written off Sunday. I probably would have done the same for tomorrow's game, but there is a wee bit of optimism now, and obviously, as I've mentioned with Osmond in the squad, I don't know if you saw the kind of training pictures today. That it just looked like a really happy camp to be in. So, what's your kind of thoughts going into that game? Obviously, that they're top of the Europa League right now with 3 wins out of 3, and I think O'Neill's kind of said on quite a few platforms that he did the game against Forest at the City Ground, and he was really impressed with them. So, what's your kind of expectations for tomorrow night's game?
Yeah, I'm feeling a lot more optimistic about it than I was probably about a week ago. I did just have this sense you were looking at them top of the table, beating Nottingham Forest away, and you were just thinking it's sort of a worst possible fixture for us to have next, because if we go there and lose, then it will just feel like a slippery slope at that point, because you're going into Feyenoord away, Roma at home, and really any chance of getting to the next phase is fading rapidly at that point. But a club have obviously seen bits of over the years, playing us, playing Rangers. I remember writing about them when he played Liverpool years ago, and there's lots to admire there. But at the same time, I don't think there should be any kind of fear factor. They are a club who were ran really, really close by Hibs in the Europa League qualifiers. They've done well so far, but I don't think they obviously caught Nottingham Forest at a good time. They beat Sturm in a similar fashion to we did, and obviously they tanned Maccabi Tel Aviv, who clearly should not be in the tournament in the first place. So I think they're worthy of respect, but not fear. You look at their results last year, I think they finished 20th out of the 36-team league phase. So I think if we can carry on what we're doing, you would like to think we could go there and get a result. But then I suppose you could debate with the situation we're in whether a draw would be a good result or not. But I definitely am feeling a lot more optimistic about it. It's just, we touched on it earlier, the idea that like the sort of fresh energy and fresh enthusiasm and all that can make a big difference in the short term, but O'Neill and Maloney are obviously going to have to back that up with sort of tactical nous as well, and this will be a good early test of that, I think, because by the sounds of it, they are a team who really know what they're doing, good young manager and so on, so it'll be interesting from that point of view as well.
Yeah, they have, Stuart, they've got a kind of star striker, don't they? I think Frankilino, I think he's called, and he seems to get good numbers every year, but he's already scored more goals this season than he did in the whole of last season. And as Scott says, they seem to be one of well, obviously from playing us, we know that they're a well-run club and they seem to maximise the resources that they do have. But one thing that's interesting for me, and obviously it kind of unravelled in recent weeks, was that Rodgers had kind of seemed to sort out our sort of defensive frailties in Europe. I thought it made us look a lot tighter last season as well. Obviously, the Dortmund game aside, but is there a concern that because we have kind of taken the shackles off in terms of creating more chances, being more sort of direct, that we could leave the back door open a wee bit?
I think so, but I think that the sample size that we've had from those two games, obviously, well, actually, Falkirk do sort of play. They don't exactly sit in a low block and just wait for you to come. I think that is the downside of what you saw at the weekend, that for all that we were dominant in the game and that we won well, we did concede some really, really big chances that a better team would have put you to the sword with. And you are playing a team tomorrow that probably would put you to the sword if you're going to cough those up. You know that boy you're talking about, he's like a goal a game domestically, and I'm pretty sure he's scored a bunch in the first 3 games in the Europa League as well. They're a very good side. They're very sort of data driven. I don't know if it's still the same ownership as Brentford, but it's all run in a very similar sort of style. And if they weren't paired, if they aren't paired now, they were before, and so it's all that kind of stuff. And I think you sort of summed it up best when you said free hit. That's how I'm looking at it, because they have played as well as they have. They're top of the table. I think that the fragility that we've had and shown in recent weeks, I don't think we have any right to suddenly, after 2 games, decide that we're back and that we can go and do it. But it would be really exciting to see if we can. And it's interesting to see where we are at in terms of getting an extra few days training in with this sort of coaching setup. Can you see extra facets or different facets of the team kind of starting to develop under O'Neill? And then ultimately, how does that compare to that defensive sort of security that we'd sort of built up? I think a point would be a really good result. I think that the actual, I think it's so early in the group stage that you don't really pay attention to specific results. But if you look around, Feyenoord and Roma, who you would have thought would have been 2 of the favourites, are sitting on like 3 and 4 points respectively as well. And Braga, who I thought were just fine when they played us, I've also won 3 from 3, so it's just maybe one of these topsy-turvy things, and it might end up being that, you know, 10, 11 points gets you there, and any points from your away games is probably helpful in that regard. So I'm excited to see where we're at, and I think that's kind of how best to view this tenure, if it is to just be these 2 weeks, just see where we're at, see how we're progressing, and hopefully it's just building on the good vibes from the weekend.
Yeah, I think that's great. That's a kind of good place to leave it. I hadn't put this on right now, but I had scheduled in a lineup quiz. We're not going to do that because we've kind of ran over a bit because there is so much to get through. But if you wanted nightmares about a Celtic starting lineup when we played them the last time in a 2-1 defeat, the team was as follows.
Can we try and guess some of them?
Right, okay, we'll finish quickly. Right.
So Dane Murray is one of the standouts.
Yes, he started with another young centre half. Welsh, there we go.
I think it was before Hart, so I'm going to say Scott Bain.
Yes. Do you know what, though? Because Barkas had been so poor, and remember the free kick went right through him, so he was dropped for this game and Bain came in.
Taylor.
It was an all-Scottish back 4.
Taylor and Ralston.
Yep, there you go.
McGregor.
Beaton, no.
McGregor scores the screamer.
Yep.
Turnbull,
yep, well done.
Rogic.
He was on the bench.
Well, that's why we were so poor.
Abada, yep. You've got 3 more to get.
Who would have been playing up front? There's nobody left. Pre-Kyogo. Eddie. French
Yep.
Eddie.
Oh, I'd absolutely checked out. And
I was reading the reports today for my sons, and they were like, I think it was Tom English.
Was Ryan Christie the other midfielder?
Yes, Christie, and he was just saying Edouard does not want to be here anymore.
Edouard has stated he does not want
a
to be here.
midfielder who was, I think I won a lot of money out of him getting him booked like in the first 10 minutes of the game. Tenacious. Sorrow, there we go.
Oh my goodness.
So that is a kind of rogues gallery of Celtic team. On the bench we had Barkas and Doohan. Welcome back.
Welcome home, brother.
Ayeti, Rogic, Bolingoli, Shaw, Robertson, Forrest, Urigide and Montgomery, who's still on the books as well. That's
Someone's O has got to
I'd
go.
love to know what level of football Shaw and Urigide are playing at nowadays. I bet it's not even top 4 tiers of English football.
The dog and duck league.
Urigide did pop up somewhere quite funny recently. And
is it Belgium? Oh no, that's where he went on loan. We loaned him there, didn't we?
Yeah.
Who knows? Answers on a postcard if anyone knows what it is.
That's it. So hopefully we get another positive result tomorrow and the good feeling continues. But Scott, thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me.
Stuart, thank you.
Thanks very much. Thanks for having me.
Welcome. This has been the Cynic Weekly. I've been your host, Barry Gallagher, with Scott Fleming and Stuart Duggan, and we'll speak to you down the road.
I will do everything I possibly can to bring some success here to the football club.
It's the Martin O'Neill effect. Celtic have prevailed in extra time. Callum McGregor with power. Too much for Butland. In my soul, every fight out of control. Kieran Tierney sliding in as Osmond. Crowd is here, about to blow. And it's Johnny Kenny with a cracker. Out the curtain, lights go up from home. Celtic have a new lease of life. It comes from their captain.
Players solved the puzzle in the game.
Martin's just giving me trust, really. That's all you need.
Now the players want to show they've got a bit about them. Your job as a Celtic player is to be in finals and win things.
Extraordinary, really, honestly, and I'm really grateful. Privileged to manage Celtic.
It's the Martin O'Neill effect. Celtic have a new lease of life.
No, you just wanted to leave, young man.